All right, I see the Zoom room is filling up. In a moment, we'll be welcoming our Facebook Live audience, but if you are here in Zoom, go ahead and let us know who you are and where you're Zooming in from. It's 9 o'clock, Happy Valley time. It's time for the Penn State Alumni Association's coffee hour. We have a great program lined up. We're going to talk to Rachael Waldoff. She is an urban sociologist and a professor, a full professor at West Virginia University. She joins us today to talk about the work that she is doing and the research that she has recently completed and turned into a book that we're going to dive in and talk about her research. Again, let us know who you are and where you're Zooming in from. We'd love to say hello and welcome you here to Coffee Hour. I see that we're live on Facebook now. Welcome to our Facebook Live audience. Again, in the comments, you could tell us who you are and where you're Zooming in from or where you're watching from. We'll be getting started in just a minute. Thanks for joining the Penn State Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. Again, good morning, everybody. Welcome in. We will be getting started in just a moment. Our conversation today is with Rachael Waldoff. She is a urban sociologist and a faculty member at West Virginia University. She's a Penn Stater, class of 1995, and we're going to talk about the great research that she has done on remote work, something we've all gotten used to over the past couple of months. And some of us, many of us are hoping that it is a lot bigger part of our future and the future workplace. So we're going to dive into that with Rachael today. Where else would you rather be than a Zoom full of Penn Staters? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association, and welcome to the Penn State Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. Each week on Coffee Hour, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about, and you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State network. We are recording this session and closed captions are available for this event. You can find that information in the chat in Zoom or in the comments on Facebook. Well, today we welcome Rachael Waldoff. Rachael is an urban sociologist and professor of sociology. She received her Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from Penn State and a PhD in sociology from another Big Ten institution, specializing in crime and community. Dr. Waldoff's research and publications have focused on neighborhood crime and disorder, urban development, racial and ethnic differences and neighborhood attainment, as well as the subject of neighborhood racial change, gentrification, housing affordability, and creative class cities, all of which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Her work has appeared in Social Forces, Urban Affairs Review, Urban Studies, and her book, White Flight, Black Flight, The Dynamics of Racial Change in the American Neighborhood, was awarded the Best Book Award from the Urban Affairs Association. Dr. Waldoff received the Eberly College Arts and Science Outstanding Researcher Award, and her newest book, Digital Nomads: In Search of Freedom, Community, and Meaningful Work in the New Economy, examines community, creative class cities, and the rise of remote work. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Rachael Waldoff to Coffee Hour. Dr. Waldoff, how are you this morning? Rachael, are you there?
I'm here. You have to allow my video, it said.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
I'm looking forward to our conversation here. Let's dive right in and share with people how you became a Penn Stater.
How I became a Penn Stater. Okay. I was at the time I applied to college, I was living in Philadelphia, West Philadelphia. Overbrook Park was the name of the neighborhood that I lived in. And I went to, starting from 5th grade through 12th, I went to Philadelphia Magnet School. So that's how I really think I became an urban sociologist. I took, the subway, the L, the bus, like almost an hour and a half each way to school. And I applied, basically my counselor had like a stack of 4 applications and Penn State was one of them. And I just filled it out. I got in for summer. So I started Penn State in 91 before I graduated high school.
Oh, that's amazing. That's right, because the Maymester starts in May, but traditional high school graduation isn't until mid-June, right?
Yeah, I didn't go to my graduation. My mom, I think, had my yearbook signed by my friends. And I was in college. I was in Cross Hall, South dorms, right across like by where McClanahan's there. Yeah.
Amazing.
And I was there for 8 weeks in the summer.
And when you were at Penn State, what were you involved in as a student?
Oh, okay. So it's interesting. I was not really into that many extracurriculars in high school. And I made a goal that I would add 1 line to my resume each year. Okay. And so I was in a sorority for a little while. It wasn't really, I was in it, but it wasn't, let's just say I didn't fit in that well into that culture as much, but I met some nice people there. But I got really into my major. I was a research assistant in psychology and in sociology. I was a TA in sociology. I want to say 2 or 3 times. And then one of the really big experiences I had there was I went through a semester-long training program at what was then called On Drugs. It was a counseling agency there. It's since changed names a couple of times. When I was there, we changed the name to Wellspring from On Drugs, and now I think it's called something else. But after you train there, you volunteer 4 hours a week to pay off the training. And then I also got a night shift there. So I worked 1 day a week from like 5:45 to 8:45 in the morning, answering crisis calls for Center County, PA. So that kept me pretty busy. Plus it was a good way to earn money. In 1 day, I could get like a big shift in. And I even did once a month, I did a 24-hour shift on the weekends. So
wow.
It was a huge, huge experience for me working there, being with older people and learning about, honestly, like drugs and even the opioid crisis before it really hit. So it was great because I kind of learned like whether or not I wanted to be a counselor or do something more academic. And and I chose this path, but all that counseling stuff helped me as a professor because I'm an advisor and, students have a lot of problems. And so I use those skills all the time.
Absolutely. This is the Penn State Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined by urban sociologist Rachael Waldoff and the author of Digital Nomads: In Search of Freedom, Community, and Meaningful Work in the New Economy. So let's start with some definitions, Rachael. What is an urban sociologist and how did you get interested in this research?
So honestly, it began at Penn State because I think it was my freshman year. I took I'm not sure why or how it happened, but I took my first sociology class was with Sam Richards, who now is like kind of a celebrity at Penn State, but I think at the time it was 91 or 2. And I think at the time he was newer to campus. And I took that class and it was a really like radical time in a way there, like a lot of Spike Lee movies had come out. I had come from a predominantly Black city in Philadelphia with a lot of, like the president of my class was Black. A lot of my teachers were Black. It was about a third Asian in my school. So I came from a really diverse place. Penn State was a little bit of a culture shock for me. And taking Sam's class, we talked about race and ethnicity, but it wasn't like a textbook kind of thing.
Right.
We had a lot of very heated class debates about just things like there was like a, racial incident at McDonald's with dogs or something.
Right.
There was a journalist for the newspaper that had been writing using some of Malcolm X's ideas, and students were reacting to that. I think it was the same year that Magic Johnson, my freshman year, told everyone he had AIDS. And so there was a lot of discussion about homophobia, about phobias around AIDS. I mean, there was a lot of stuff like that going on, or maybe that's just how it felt to me, because I'm interested in things like that. And so class was crazy. We'd come in and it was just like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen today? And I loved it. Like I found my thing. And I loved Sam. I took all his classes. And I think I mentioned this to you, Paul, that I actually dedicated, when I finished my PhD, I dedicated my dissertation to Sam.
Right.
I think my advisor was like, who is that? I'm like, oh, that was, and I think he was a lecturer at the time I came to Penn State. And I think like people might have expected you would dedicate it to like your parents or to like a professor in grad school, but I didn't. I was like, no, I know why I'm here. I'm here because of him. I talk about him all the time. And we're still friends. We still chat. And I believe he's on the call right now. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Sam changed my life. I mean, that class changed my life. I can't.
Sam Richards is legendary, as you say. You remember the topics that you discussed in his class because he brought those topics to life. And I'm sure, right, what seemed like really, and they were, because I was in school at the same time you were, they were really big topics at the time. But I think Sam's got a way of taking current events and bringing them into the classroom and creating really meaningful discussions around those. And now it's turned into Voices or World in Conversation, and has really kind of blown up into almost a side practice, if you will, for them, kind of teaching people how to have these important conversations that are really difficult to have. Before we dive into your latest book, I'm wondering if you might indulge us with some questions around your work around the city you've codenamed Parkmont in your White Flight, Black Flight book. If you were asked to give a brief history of demographics of that city, how would you describe it?
Of the city or the neighborhood?
Of the neighborhood, sorry. It's the Parkmont neighborhood in a larger city.
Yeah,
right?
and the thing about that book is people constantly think they know, because it's such a familiar story. They're like, I know exactly what city that is, because that happened, where I'm from. And I'm like, that happened in a lot of places, so that's the great thing about qualitative research. If you do it correctly, it feels really real, and so this is an area that was primarily Jewish, Italian, Irish, working class, row house community. And then the school had integration busing, and in the 70s and 80s, and then very rapidly, it went from being a very small percentage Black to being one of the three most, so the way I found it actually was through teaching. I was teaching my students how to use census data, and I pulled up this neighborhood and I was like, oh, wait, it went from this percent to this percent Black. It was, I want to say, I can't remember exactly now, it was less than 10% Black to like 60% Black in 10 years, which is in the city it's in. It's one of only 3 neighborhoods that changed that much. So I looked at the census data and made like a change score, and I saw that only 3 neighborhoods had changed that much. And so I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder what happened. And then I just drove there and I just started talking to residents. I was like, oh, why? when did this happen? How did this happen? And I found that there were like kind of three groups of people there. There were really four. The people who already left, obviously I couldn't interview.
Right.
But then there were what I call the stayers. Like, what kinds of white people stay when a neighborhood is in the midst of rapid white flight? And I think what people think white flight is from the 50s and 60s, but it's now also.
Right.
And so I interviewed the stayers and asked them, like, how do you stay when people are telling you should leave, And then I interviewed what I call the pioneers, which are the people who moved to and bought a house from a white resident, Black residents who bought, and they moved while the neighborhood was still mainly white. And then I have what I call the second wave, Black residents that bought from a Black resident as the neighborhood was turning over much, much more rapidly. And I just interviewed them about some of the more surprising stories about cross-racial neighboring, the role that Black residents play in helping white people age in place. They were mainly elderly white people. And the Black residents were mainly people who bought homes, and they were mainly doing, they were sort of emergency workers, first responders, police, nurses, EMTs, city workers, bus drivers, things like that. And I had lots of stories about how they helped those people maintain their homes and stay there. And then I had another story about how the neighborhood had become basically, and now it's almost all African American. The school has since closed. There have been signs of decline there since then. But I sort of forecasted that at the end of the book that was happening. And not for any reason then, there's a lot of research, quantitative research on this, but like if, when people look at preferences about where people live, a neighborhood can't maintain integration if the only people buying are Black. So
Right.
How do we encourage white home buyers to buy in a mixed neighborhood? And so it's a lot about fear, and prejudice and racism and scare tactics and stereotypes and things like that create a problem that didn't really need to happen.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of great work on these topics. I know the This American Life podcast has looked at certain neighborhoods where they could draw a line down the street, where on one side of the street, same neighborhood, one side of the street, it's the white, Jewish, Italian, right? And they sell property to people who are of that demographic. And the other side was the Latino and African American. And just the way that property changed hands was really interesting. And you could tell it was right down racial lines. Fascinating.
Yeah, in this case, it was a lot of like, honestly, as soon as Black residents, so the school turned Black very quickly once the integration busing happened, because many of the Catholics sent their kids to Catholic school if they could. And then many Jews either moved or they sent their kids, in my case too, like to a magnet. And so that left Black residents who were not residents, they were being bussed in. And then what happens is you have a Black school in a white neighborhood. So then white home buyers are looking at the school and don't want their kids to go there, because Philly is a very, or many cities, I should say, are very racialized environments. And so that really affects what houses seem desirable to people.
And we saw that. So we lived in North Carolina for 10 years. We saw that in the South, where some of the neighborhoods didn't exactly change, but the makeups of the schools did. When schools integrated, a lot of white families decided to go private school route. And so there was flight from the public schools to the private schools, and didn't necessarily lead to as much moving of populations, like changing of neighborhoods, as much as it did where students were studying, which became a real educational issue for both sets of students, right? Black and white alike had diminished experiences because they weren't in diverse classrooms and being able to learn some of the social aspects that you learn while being in diverse classrooms.
Yeah, it's one of the saddest things. I live in the suburbs for the very first time in my life right now. I have two kids. One, my daughter's Black and she's adopted. And just there's no Black faculty, there's no Black staff, and I mean zero. There's one Black child in her class. My son's gone 5 years with no Black students in his class. And it's very disturbing to me, given the way I grew up. I just feel that a lot is missing in their lives from that experience. And I'm really struggling with that, but it's really difficult to explain to people who haven't lived through like a diverse classroom the way I did throughout my entire time in school, the benefits of that, of having that discourse and having that sensitivity. And like this year, at my children's school, they had a colonial day, and I had to like really fight them
Wow.
on it and say, like, you don't understand, like, that's not okay anymore.
Right.
Like, how can you not know this, But I had to really fight with them. And I feel like at my schools where I grew up, I had a lot of Black teachers, and I just think they wouldn't have allowed that. Certainly, in Philadelphia, if there's ever
Right.
going to be a place where there's colonial day, you would think it would be there, but it wasn't, because
Right.
I think that the teachers there knew not to romanticize those times,
Right. So that work led you to your latest work, Digital Nomads, looking at, the migration patterns of the workforce. Talk a little, first of all, what's a digital nomad? We're just showing a screenshot. We're showing a screenshot of your book right now.
Yeah. So this came from, I was working again through teaching. Shout out to Sam. I had students that were interested in working in the movement from people working in coffee shops. They were interested in this concept of creative class cities, cities that are trying to have knowledge workers there. Like Pittsburgh, where Richard Florida, who's now in Canada, but that's like his term, creative class cities. And I was interested in this idea of creative class cities. And I just started doing some research on this idea of failure of modern cities. And I'd written a book called Priced Out about New York, and about how people cannot afford to live in the city anymore,
right,
and how that happens, why that happens. And there were a lot of stories about how unlivable cities are in terms of wages versus housing. And then also just like all the amenities of creative class cities that are supposed to be amazing, right? Like everyone's trying to have, there's bike paths, and there's yoga, and there's smoothies, and there's, all these like upper class things there. But what I was hearing was like, you can't use those things anyway, because you're just working.
right.
And then you're living in a tiny apartment and commuting, and, it's not really like that, as a lived experience for many employees. So I started doing some research on that. And then I saw that people were like moving to these hubs and traveling to hubs of what are called digital nomads, which are just honestly remote workers. So if you can do your work now this was years ago. This is in 2017 we started doing this research. Right. Which at the time, when I would talk about this, people were like, what? Like, had no idea what I was talking about. So they were people, mainly people who had gotten burnt out, many like millennials, right, people in their 30s. I think our mean age is 33 in the sample, who let's say they're in New York, or they're in Dublin, or they're in San Francisco, Paris, London. I think we have 17 countries covered in our sample. And they were 22, they had a job they were psyched for, whether it's Google or Facebook or Under Armour or whatever it is. They were like, yes, I'm going to work. This is my identity. Like, I'm creative. I'm in this creative class job. But then by the time they're 30, they're realizing the job's not really that creative, and that they don't really have free time. They commute. They're not making a ton of money, and it's very expensive where they live. And a lot of them were just burnt out and unhappy by the time they were 30, and they were trying to figure out how to find more than like 2 weeks of vacation time so they could travel and stuff like that.
Right.
And so, I read a big digital nomad hub is in Bali in Indonesia, which that's very far from here, obviously. But
Sure.
for people like in Australia, it's only like a 3-hour flight from Perth, or and people in other countries travel obviously a lot more than people in the US for various reasons that we outline in the book. So I did an IRB, like an approval for that research. And as soon as I got there, I met a ton of people who could not wait to tell me their sort of escape story. They're fleeing the cubicle, their like emancipation from their job, and they would tell me like what we call push factors. What pushed you? You had like a great job in a great city, and they would tell me these things like it's not what you think it is, and it's not really creative, and they would tell me these stories. And then they also told me about the pull factors, and then they would say like, well, why Bali though? I mean, you could just work remotely at a Starbucks in Pittsburgh. And they were like, no, it's not the same. And that's where we talk a lot about in-person community and why digital nomads go to hubs to find like-minded people. And like-mindedness, not just like in terms of your favorite sports team or something like that, but in terms of like core life values, like less materialism, a developmental mindset around self-improvement, views about creativity, and so these people are more like-minded on a whole bunch of dimensions, and they're very extreme. Obviously, someone who's going to leave their home life is very different from
Right.
the average remote worker, but it still has a lot to tell us about what's happened in the last year and why people don't want to go back to the office.
Absolutely. Yeah. The graphic designer artist that gets a great job in Manhattan, right? Or wants to live in Soho, right? To be with other creative people, has to live with 8 people that have an apartment down there to afford it, or has to live in New Jersey, right? To be able to afford to work downtown. And so there's there's a lot of challenges that are the younger segment of our workforce is facing as they enter the workforce. You look at the rise of remote work versus face time in the office and the failure of traditional work. And that you mentioned 2017, you started this work. The trend began before COVID-19, but has become familiar now with most of the world after the last 15 months. Can you kind of look forward and see what changes need to be made in the workplace, right? Whether it's mindset, whether it's policy, of how, like, maybe use us as an example, or your workplace as an example, right? We're a very traditional university here at Penn State, and now a good portion of our staff has caught the bug of work from home and remote work, and they prefer that now. How do workplaces have to adjust to both, keep their employees satisfied, but also meet the bottom line goals that they have as an organization?
I mean, the research seems to be showing that people are productive at home. I think, like, not to get too sociology oriented, but I think that one of the issues I see, like, I'm just looking at data, even from WVU, I have a sample of data where we did a pulse survey of workers and asked them about remote work. People like working from home, even in a place that's really known for being remote and rural, and you might think more conventional values around that. In reality, even and this in State College, people commute in remote places, a long commute a lot of times. There are feminist issues, women who are grateful to be able to pick their kids up and drop them off, who are grateful to be able to throw a load of laundry in at lunch, who are grateful to be able, a lot of women do caregiving of their in-laws, of their parents, of their elderly. So being able to do that and have some flexibility during their day. health. I mean, people being able to be by a window, to work outside, to go for a walk, to have healthy food and not be eating like, Panera or something. And so these are like huge, like wellness issues too. And in a state like even like in West Virginia, it's very unhealthy, in Pennsylvania too. And then and I think like, I really think this is something that women are really going to have to sort of view as a feminist issue of like, so many women leave the workplace because, with your commute and working till 6 and everything, you're not going to be home till 7 or something. It's just really hard to do everything. But imagine that you could pick your kids up at 3:30 and get your work done, which we know now you can get your work done, So a lot of the fears about this imaginary boogeyman of like lazy workers. And it's like, yeah, you can be wearing sweatpants and get your work done. You can not have a bra on and get your work done. Right. You can not have your makeup on and get your work done. A lot of people are really you can light a candle. You can take a break and meditate and lie on the floor for half an hour. There are like things that you can do that can refresh you and make you more creative and make you happy about work. So I think that there's also this generational part of it and I think there's also an issue with managers, right. Managers are very worried people are being lazy and not working, and there's this undignified control aspect to it all. But if they could imagine letting that go and think about the future and Gen Z and millennials, right. Which are now actually, and think about what's a compassionate workplace. What, do I have to view my workers as lazy and right. view like the worst tendencies, when really we're finding that people are doing their work. And if you focus instead of hours on like the work product at the right. end, and then there are ways to build community remotely. Like you could have a hybrid, where you have people come in for certain things. But if they don't really have to come in, maybe have them come in for something more value added, like affinity groups, where you right. have a group come in. Like for me this year has been, as someone with a Black child and with my research interests, I've done a lot of anti-racism work. I voluntarily taught an extra class on anti-racism, which is not normal at an R1 research school to voluntarily teach extra, right. And I did that at half pay. I co-taught it with a Black colleague of mine, and it was very fulfilling, but that was because I wanted to do that. Like I wanted to provide that to our students after this year. We have a lot of criminology students, and I wanted to help them process what's happened in the last year. I started an anti-racism committee with my colleague in our department. That's an affinity group. That's us right. deciding together, we care about this. Everybody in the department doesn't care about it equally, but for us, this was a huge issue. We started asking ourselves, okay, like George Floyd and these instances, why do we only have one Black faculty member? Why is our university have the same number of Black faculty as we did in the 70s? Like we started looking at ourselves and like trying to really hold ourselves accountable, looking at our syllabi and asking how many Black authors are in here? How much of what's in here is critical versus right. functionalist, meaning like upholding the status quo. So really trying to, look more carefully at how we're contributing to the reproduction of racism on campus, and so that's for me an affinity group. That's something I chose right. to do. And I think workplaces could have things like that. Like, for instance, I talked to the Cancer Center at WVU and I said, you guys are doing great things. You're like helping figure out like how to deal with cancer, but maybe some of you were affected by breast cancer. You could have an affinity group around breast cancer. Maybe so you could have groups about cancer right. that you feel passionate about. And it almost doesn't even, I hate to say this because it's so neoliberal, but it almost doesn't feel like work sometimes because you care about it so much. So I think there are solutions. We just have to get away from what we used to do and stop being so narrow-minded that FaceTime always means community. Because all of us have seen that person in the office who's always there and they're with solitaire and they're just sitting around right. and pushing papers, avoiding their family or whatever. And they're not exactly the role model to the younger generations that you might imagine they are. And I, and
Absolutely.
the opposite, I've also, in my time at Ohio State, it was the same thing. You'd see workaholics. I saw faculty who slept in their offices with a
Mm,
bedroll. That's not a good role model either
right.
for work, you know? So thinking about like when younger people look at, I'm 48, when younger people look at me, are they thinking, I don't want to be like her? Like if they are,
Absolutely.
then I'm not doing a good job mentoring, you know?
Absolutely. I want to dive a little bit into something you said earlier about remote work being a feminist issue. Um, can you talk a little bit more about that? Because the I think that's an important. I think that's an important piece of this conversation, right? Women either leave the workforce permanently after they have children, or they take a pause to quote unquote raise their children, and then go back to the workforce. And oftentimes it is used against them, right? It is what we use to explain the gender gap in salaries, and yet it's artificial, or it's not really valid. Can you talk a little bit more
Yeah, I
about?
mean, I'll just anecdotally, I
Yeah,
just see since I've, it's strange being a sociologist in a way because you're in grad school till you're 30,
right,
basically. I was, and I started when I was 23 or whatever, and you're in this like little microcosm of like progressivism, I would say, and you're just doing your work and you're thinking about the work and everything, and then you get a job and you're either, some of us get married and have children, and getting married and having children, you are now exposed to like normal people, like
right,
more, people who are not obsessed with inequality as their like research
right,
and teaching and service. And I would see where I live, a lot of women with multiple master's degrees that are stay-at-home moms. A lot of stay-at-home mom energy where I live.
right,
And I was interested in that. I would ask them about it, but a lot of times it came down to like, we're in Pittsburgh. Where am I gonna, where am I gonna work? I'm gonna work downtown. I'm gonna commute. I'm gonna take the bridges, the tunnels. I'm not, who's gonna pick up the kids? Who's gonna, and it's not that like, yes, you can sometimes hire someone or have daycare, but what if you want to pick up the kids? I pick up my husband and I are professors. So we teach opposite days.
right,
So we can always pick up our kids. And I can tell you, it's nice to do that. It's nice to get my work done and then go to the school, talk to the teachers, see the other parents. If they had a good day, reward them. We walk home, I
right,
help them with their homework, but I still have a job and an identity. And I feel like I have my own thing going on
right.
that's working for me. And I see other women, who 10 years have passed, they want to go back, and now they're doing something that they don't really want to do or they can't do, and they still are going to have to do the commute and everything. So I think that if women were able to work from home at least multiple days a week, and then the other side of it on the men's side, and this is
Right.
being, by the way, very heteronormative, but I also have gay
Right.
friends here who are going through similar things now at pickup during COVID, because my kids have been in school. I see men there now.
Right.
They know where the classroom is. They know the teachers' names. They are at diversity meetings. They're at events. So that's a feminist issue. Like, this is your job too. Like, and so it helps even out some of the responsibilities and burdens,
Absolutely.
Before all of this, I would go to PTA meetings, even the ones at night for working moms, but still all women there. There were
Right.
no men at our PTA meetings. And it's all very gendered, the homeroom mom and it's like the 50s when you're a mom sometimes, in the suburbs. So I definitely think like it would be revolutionary if women could have professional creative class jobs, and work from home several days a week, or at least enough to be present and not have to have full-time care at 3:30 or whatever.
Absolutely. Another thing that emerged from your research, many of us are familiar with the midlife crisis, right? But you have identified and done some work on Gen Z and millennials who are experiencing a quarter life crisis, or some quarter life burnout. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah, I
about
love
that?
talking about this because this is one of the things, when you write a book in academia, it goes for peer review and everything, and you get a lot of criticism back, and people think of, a lot of people think of millennials and Gen Z as big whiners and like, poor you, and you're a snowflake and all this kind of stuff. And certainly when my husband, who's my co-author, and I were talking to people about this, they were like, yeah, like work's not fulfilling. And you just like, yeah, like you sit in your office and do nothing part of the day. That's like how work is. Like, shut up. You know what I mean? Like, do your time, stop complaining, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. I was like, it doesn't have to be that way. You know that, right? But people my age really have accepted that, like, yeah, work's like boring sometimes, and like you just sit there, and that's how it is. And I think like for younger people, people who are work identified and really want to develop at work and grow, when they're like sitting around the office and trying to find stuff to do and starting a blog, or when they're trying to do creative work and it's actually not creative and a million people are micromanaging and signing off on it. And one person said to me, like, I had one person in the sample who had an internship at a big company in college. She worked there for 8 years. She was a designer, clothing designer, very creative job, a dream job, got moved to New York. Okay. And then on like 24 hours notice would have to fly to China for like approvals on fabrics and things like that, and then come right back again. And she would just say, like, I can't live like this. This is just making me crazy. But like people your age, and she meant me, are like, what are you complaining about? Like, stop complaining. You have this great job. You like, just suck it up, and her view was like, I've worked here 8 years. Like, how much longer do I have to do this for you to think that I've like withstood, the traditional workplace? And I think that's what they're asking themselves. Like, if you go in hard in your 20s and you're still miserable when you're 30, you're wondering, like, if I just keep going, mindlessly keep going, is that a great decision for me? What will my future look like? Will I be happy? Will I have fulfillment? I even remember, like, Sam said something to me when I was thinking about grad school. Sam kind of reminds me of a rabbi. Rabbis talk you out of converting a whole bunch of times if you're trying to convert to Judaism. Sam will be like, I don't know if you want to do this. It's like academia is like, it's cutthroat. It's a lot of fee. Oh, I remember this exactly, him saying
Right.
this. He said, all the fear. Because academics are obsessed with tenure. They're afraid of rejection and not getting tenure, not being successful. And he was like, I don't know. I don't really push people into this, And I was like, I want to do this. But there is this idea of like, of what if I just keep going mindlessly? And so it is important. I say this to my students all the time. Why are you doing this? Why are you here? Why are you in college? Why are you in grad school? If you don't want to do your thesis, quit. Like, leave. You don't have to do this. You know what I mean? And I think that's like what a lot of the Gen X and Gen Z and millennials are sort of, they're just kind of moving. And then all of a sudden it hits them like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And then one of the big questions is like, do I have to be in the office to do this? Because a lot of times what they're doing, they don't have to be there. But before COVID, they would say to their boss, picture a 25-year-old who's been there for a year saying, listen, can I just do this remotely? Because I am on a laptop all day. And the boss is like, no. Right. Who do you think you are, you 25-year-old,
right.
Entitled, and it's like, but now we're finding, I just really quickly, I have a friend who told me this story. She works at a bank in Pittsburgh. She met with her team, and a Gen Z person was like, can I work from home on Fridays, one day a week? And they were like, no, you have to work here this many years, blah, 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 blah. Like all these rules before you could work from home one day a week. COVID hit. And they were like, can you believe we told you that last week? And now we're just going to be online for like a year and a half. And I was like, because it was always possible, but we just wouldn't allow it because of the control. And I just think it's interesting to think about the future and like how empowering the future can be and how freeing we can be at work if we want to. I really think if there's a will, we can figure out creative ways to keep community and also have like liberation at work.
Absolutely. So we have a couple questions coming in from the audience.
Okay.
David wants to know, why is the city and neighborhood confidential? He's saying, I'm a Philadelphian and would like to know what neighborhood you were studying. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's two approaches to this, okay? And this is always a really hard thing. Like I'm writing a book right now that's in Pittsburgh, and it's and I've written a book in New York, and then I did Bali. This is the only one I think that I had the city anonymized and the neighborhood anonymized. So you have two choices when you do a project like this. You can tell the city, tell the neighborhood, but then you have to conceal things about the actual people. Otherwise, you would be able to identify them. And in my in White Flight, Black Flight, the people in my book were talking about drug dealing, crime. They were talking about each other in the neighborhood. And they were telling, sometimes you don't know what's going to happen in an interview. Like right now, I'm interviewing people who are being evicted. You know, I have a meeting on Friday with someone that was homeless before she lived there. Maybe she doesn't want everyone to know her business, you know, or I've met people, you know, and she was homeless because of domestic violence. In my Nomads study, there were people who were raped. There were people who had abortions. There were people who went to private boarding schools in England and were molested. And, you know, do they want their name on that? You know, so so you have two choices, basically. You can either keep the place anonymous and keep every detail of everything everyone said. So you can have their exact job, you change nothing about what they've said pretty much. So it's very, very concrete. Or you can keep the name of the place, but then you're going to have to change some things up about what they said because they'd be too easy to identify.
Right.
And so, like, I'll give you an example. If you look at the book, it's called Sidewalk by Mitch Dunier, and he's at Princeton. He actually took pictures of his people who were Black, and they were mainly homeless, and many of them were on drugs. And there was some pushback about that. It was like, why are you taking pictures? You know, this is a vulnerable population. Yes, they gave you permission, but did they really understand the magnitude of what they were giving permission for? And like, you know, you don't want to be paternalistic, but at the same time, we have something called human subjects research, and we have to protect people. And we have to know that like there are consequences for people identifying them. And like in my case with the project I'm doing in Pittsburgh right now, people are talking about like their eviction, and they're talking about public housing, and they're talking about shootings in the community and stuff like that. So if I got too detailed on certain things, you might be able to identify them.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Kim has a question about some of your previous research. Can you share successful examples of law enforcement in community development?
Successful examples of law enforcement. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've evolved a lot in the time I've been working. I think when I wrote, one of my biggest regrets about White Flight, Black Flight is, and it was at the time as well, but I would, you know, ask people, why don't you call the police? Okay, that was a huge, there's a theory called social disorganization theory that focuses a lot on this concept that communities that are successful intervene when there are problems in the neighborhood. So residents, if they see kids, you know, playing hooky, they'll say, "What, aren't you supposed to be at school?" That kind of thing. And that's been criticized a lot in recent years, especially. At the time, I would ask Black residents, like, if you see, you know, people dealing drugs, why don't you call the police? I don't think I fully understood to the Black community what calling the police meant back then, that they knew and I didn't really understand. And not to say the whole book is invalid, but I just think that like they couldn't explain it to me and I didn't fully understand. And I think now I am able to see much more the consequences of calling the police for Black people. And But having said that, though, in white flight, black flight, a lot of people had relationships, positive relationships with the police.
Right.
And some of that came from having a liaison in the community that knew the residents, that looked like the residents. So in the community I studied, the person was a black woman and who lived there. And so she really knew, and she knew what it meant to these people to finally move to this area and how this felt like social mobility to them and why they were concerned about certain activities in the neighborhood, and how it's not just like a white thing to be concerned about hearing gunshots, that black people are also concerned about that. And that should be validated, and we shouldn't ask black people to normalize that, or like, why are you complaining about that? You're from an even worse neighborhood. This is better. So shut up. You know, she understood why they were still concerned about those things. And so she was really good at not normalizing the problems in that community, and like helping residents figure out strategies for that. Now, that being said, though, the residents had like a phone chain, and if something happened, they had everyone call the police at the same time and put them on blast so they would be accountable, because frequently when one person calls, it could be an hour before the police would come. So they weren't very responsive in those communities.
It assumes.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I have a ton of criminology majors, and I think like one of the biggest things that has to happen is like who we recruit and changing the culture. It's huge. As someone that's taught since '03 criminology students mainly, I teach juvenile delinquency, I teach neighborhoods and crime. I see my students and I see them changing even now. This year has been a real wake-up call to them about what has been allowed to happen in policing and what needs to stop.
Yeah, it's based on the assumption that the community trusts the police, right?
Right.
And in each community, and really each neighborhood, each city block has it's different, right? The relationship with the police is different, and so it's hard to make a blanket statement because
no,
what
if you're policing black neighborhoods, people have to realize these are communities that have been traumatized by policing. People have family members incarcerated for long periods of time. People have had children taken from them. People have had police call them names, had them called the N-word, have had them just be disrespectful, have been running in my neighborhood I'm studying, running through the neighborhood with a gun drawn while children are playing. Like, it's hard, I think, for a lot of white people to imagine that kind of policing, because the kind of policing we get where we live is not like that. And I can tell you that it really doesn't look like that. It looks very different in their communities, and they have a right to feel afraid of the police and to express that they don't view the police as helpers.
Absolutely.
You know, and we have to listen to them.
Absolutely.
Sam even talk about radical empathy, like try to listen, you know, to like what they're telling us and not be fragile and defensive all the time, you know?
Absolutely. This is the Penn State Alumni Association's Coffee Hour. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined by urban sociologist Rachael Waldoff. She's the author of Digital Nomads in Search of Freedom, Community, and Meaningful Work in the New Economy. Rachel, we like to end with a little bit of a lighter segment that we call our lightning round. And so I have just a couple quick hitter questions that I'm going to ask you. First, you're a professor at West Virginia University. Have you ever burned a couch after a West Virginia football game?
No, but I have lived next to people who have, and I did call the police.
How about your favorite class at Penn State?
Oh, without a doubt. 119, Soc 119 changed my life. I'll never be able to explain to anyone the effect that class had on me. Huge.
If you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. Who would it be at dinner with anyone? Who would it be and why? Let's see. Oh my gosh. I thought about this question so many times because the New York Times has like a little question in the book review. I'm going to say Prince.
Okay.
I don't know if that's very academic, but I really regret never going to a Prince concert. And I would love to like sit down with him and like have, I don't know how much he eats. He's very thin, but at least like just hang out with him, maybe do karaoke,
Right.
Dance with him, do, just like be with him.
Absolutely. Well, if you ever visit Minneapolis, you can visit his home. They've turned it into a museum, and it's fantastic.
I would love. Have you done that?
We went to play in Minnesota, and several people who were traveling with us did the Prince tour. It was more of a religious experience for them than it would have been for me, but they loved it. So if you're a Prince fan, it's a must do.
Yeah.
How about
there's a yoga instructor, the yoga practice, it's remote. It's called Active Peace Yoga. Shout out to Reggie Hubbard. And he does Prince yoga.
Oh my gosh.
It's awesome.
Sounds amazing. What is your most unusual We Are moment? Maybe a unusual or unexpected place where somebody shouted out "We Are" that caught you by surprise.
We are. I'm horrible. Anyone who hears this that went to Penn State with me knows I do not know anything about sports. And so I was like a super uber nerd when I was in college. So I liked movies and stuff, but here's my We Are. My sentimental memories of Penn State are a lot about, I didn't have a car, and a lot about High Street, like going to the diner where my friend was a waitress and I got free French onion soup, and I ate like pastries and studied all night with my boyfriend who was also in the sociology department, and just like all my like hanging out on High Street with my sociology people. Like that was my thing. I loved, like, one of the best things about Penn State that I wish we had at WVU is like High Street was what in sociology we call like a third place. It's like not work, it's not home. It's a place where you can be with your friends. And I wasn't binge drinking. I wasn't doing any of that. I was just like having huge conversations about social issues while eating delicious food. And I was so happy. And it was a great time in my life. So much personal growth on High Street at all those little places. So I loved going to the daily grind. I was briefly a vegetarian. There was like a new age bookstore I went to, and I bought like crystals, and I went to Irving so I could get my Jewish self on, frozen yogurt. It was so 80s and 90s. It was crazy 90s. I mean, but those are my happy memories of Penn State, really.
Absolutely. Rachel, if people want to learn more about your work, where can they go to find your writings or more about what you're studying?
Yeah, so I don't like to promote Amazon for various reasons, but my books are on there. I have an author page there, 4 books I've written, High Stakes, White Flight, Black Flight, this new book about digital nomads, and then I have Priced Out, my 4 books. And then I have different articles I've written. You can go to the WVU website, Rachael Waldoff, I'm on there. And those are the main places. On Great Reads or Goodreads, my books are also there. You can write reviews and stuff, which helps sell the book. But it's an academic book. I'm just going to warn you, but it's a lot of interviews. So it's juicy. It's supposed to be a crossover book, and it also has a lot of business stuff because my co-author is a business professor. So it's a lot of interviews. It's not like a lot of the books you might read in college. It's really relatable stories. And I find at least with the Digital Nomads book, all I have to do is talk to someone for a few minutes and they're like, that's me. That's me. They relate to it so much. I think it'll be something that most people will relate to after this horrible past year. That's great. And in the follow-up email, we'll include the links to how you can get one of Rachel's books. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us on Coffee Hour. Thank you for having me. Absolutely. And I want to thank everybody who is tuning in. If you're a member of the Penn State Alumni Association, thank you for your support. If not, what are you waiting for? Go to our website at alumni.psu.edu. and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thanks for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are Penn State.